Hey, ladies and gentlemen, here we are on another Wednesday evening. I'm Tommy,
And I'm Joe.
and this is ToJo Live.
Welcome to ToJo Live.
Hey, guys, welcome to another episode of ToJo Live, where we are here to discuss your questions about life, faith, and the church. We would love to hear your questions. We would love for you to come on screen and ask your questions. You could do that by copying and pasting the link that Tammy will eventually put in the chat box. Or if you're more comfortable just putting your questions in the chat box and not coming on screen, that is perfectly fine. And we will address them as they come up. And as always, any prayer request or prayer of praises that you may have, we will definitely pray about those. We want to start off with a passage of scripture. And this one comes from Judges chapter 3, verse 31. And it says, after Ehud was one of the judges of Israel. After Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel. So after Ehud came another judge by the name of Shamgar. And there's only like 2 verses in the whole Bible that mention Shamgar. This one, and then there's one of them that talks a little bit about his family. The interesting thing about this one is we get an idea of Shamgar. Shamgar was a son of Anath who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel. Now, I don't know if you know what an ox goad is or not, but an ox goad was not a military weapon. An ox goad was a long stick and sometimes had a pointed tip on it. It could be whittled down like a tip, like a wooden tip, or sometimes they would put rock in there. They would strap rock or metal onto it and file it down where it had a tip. And it was for the purpose of guiding oxen. And oxen, as you may know, had thick skin, and so just a regular stick sometimes wouldn't do the job, so they would have that pointy end onto it. So they would stick them a little bit, get their attention a little more, and then they would move in the direction that the shepherd would have them go. So when it says that Shamgar struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad, that's pretty remarkable considering the fact that that was not a military weapon. Okay, that was a farm tool is what it was. Pat Williams, who passed away, I think it was earlier this year. It hasn't been too long ago. Christian guy, used to own the Orlando Magic basketball team. Excellent guy if you've ever heard him teach on leadership, and he taught coaching classes and stuff like that. He was amazing. But he once wrote a whole book just on Shamgar. Like I said, really only 2 verses of the Bible is all we have on Shamgar. So how do you write a whole book on these 2 verses about a guy that's only got this little ink in the Bible? But Pat Williams wrote this book, and he split it up into 3 categories because he said this about Shamgar. And this is what we can learn from Shamgar. Shamgar did what he could right where he was with what he had. Actually, he may have interchanged those. He did what he could with what he had right where he was. Yeah, that's the way he said it. Did what he could with what he had right where he was. And he actually broke that book up into 3 categories. Do what you can right where you are. And he talks about being present, and you're not always just, man, if I could just get to this place, or if I could just get to that place. No, do what you can where you are. Do as much as you can in your present moment where you are, whether it's you're talking about your job, you're talking about your family, you're talking about your church, whatever the case may be. Do what you can where you are. And then the second part of the book was, and I got to run through this a minute, do what you can right where you are. Do what you can with what you have.
Right where you are.
right where you are.
There you go.
So with what you have, and you do that, whatever talent you have, whatever education you have, whatever tools you may have, and you'll hear people saying, man, if I just had a better computer, I could be more effective. Or if I just had a better office, if I was just smarter, I could be so much more effective. Do what you can with what you have. Whatever you have, use it. Don't just wish you had something else. Now, if you want to get something else along the way, if you want to earn that, if you want to get training, you want to become more knowledgeable, if you want to save up, buy a better computer, do that. But don't wait until that happens before you do something, because you do what you can with what you have right where you are. And then, the other section of that, I think I went in reverse order, but do what you can. Maybe you can't do as much as you could if you did have a better computer or if you were in a different place. That's okay. Do what you can right now with what you have right where you are. So I love that passage of Scripture. It is such a short passage of Scripture, and yet you could do a sermon series just on that verse of Scripture. Here's the quote for the day, and I think I may have used this before, but it's been a while. Comes from Winston Churchill. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it says, "Success is going from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm." Listen, success is not about avoiding failure. It's about working through the failure. The most common characteristic of people who are successful is failure. They have failed their way to success, but they didn't lose the enthusiasm. They didn't let that failure stop them. They didn't let it demotivate them to the point that they just gave up. They learned from it and they kept going. Success is going from failure to failure without a loss of enthusiasm. Joe, how are you this evening, my friend?
Brother, it's good to be with you again. Always a pleasure. And I love that verse and the book that was written on that. That whole phrase, do what you can, what you have, and it reminded me of a TV show that used to be on TV. Obviously, if a TV show would be anywhere else, it was called MacGyver. I don't know if you remember MacGyver.
I remember MacGyver.
MacGyver, this guy that always found himself in some horrible situation, and he had to do what he did. I'm chuckling because it's totally that.
Yeah.
And it's a calling to all of us. We're not always going to have everything we need to do everything we want. But if we recognize that we could only do what we have.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
Do what you can with what you have right where you are. Some people called my dad MacGyver.
Yes, he was.
Because he was so creative. I remember one time, I was just a kid, and I don't remember all the details of it. But he had this old yellow Datsun truck. Yeah. You remember those for the 80s?
Yeah.
My dad had an orange one.
Yeah. I think they were all the same color at one time, but the longer you had them, the more the color kind of faded into either yellow or orange or whatever. But he was, me, my brother-in-law, and my dad, we were driving down to the lake. We were going on a fishing trip, and something happened to the truck. It stopped running, and so Dad pulled it over. We're on the side of the road. It is a very unpopulated area. It's just like nothing but woods for several miles. And when I say several, I don't mean like hundreds, but like, maybe 7 or 8 miles is just nothing but woods. And he pulled it over and he was not a mechanic. He knew a little bit about cars, but he was by no stretch a mechanic. And he opened up the hood and he looked under the hood, and some kind of something was happening with, I forget what it was. And my dad took a limb out of a tree and he cut it to about a 2-inch length, and he put it into these two areas with some kind of tubing or something that was messed up or leaking or something. And he did that, and we drove the truck the rest of the way so. And then there was one other thing. I was older when this happened, and so I remember more of the details of this. Again, we were fishing one time. We were on a pontoon boat, and if you're familiar with boats, you know they've got propellers in the back, and that's how you drive them. And he had started up the boat, and we weren't going anywhere. And we were like out in the middle of the lake. We were like in a secluded area, and we had been bluegill fishing, and he went back there to look at it, and the propeller had fallen off. Like the engine was there, and even the rod that the propeller was on was there, but the blades, the actual propeller was gone. It had fallen off the boat. And we had another propeller in the boat, but it had like a key in there to hold it on. In that rod, there was a hole, and it would hold the propeller on. The key was gone. Apparently it had rusted or something, or fallen out or something, and that's what caused the propeller to fall off when he started it. And so we had another propeller to put on, but we didn't have any way to hold it on. And so my dad we've got paddles out of this pontoon boat, and we paddled over to the shore. There was this old beat up lawn chair that was on the bank there. He took a fusee. I don't know if you know what a fusee is. It looks like a stick of dynamite. But what it is you snap the head off of it, and it's got a flint on it, and you rub the flint against the front of that, and it's a fire. It's like a blue fire, which means it's really hot. Sometimes people use fusees if they're like broke down on the side of the road, and they'll use it to show traffic that they're there. He used to have a bunch of these. He worked on the railroad, and they used them on the railroad, and so he would have a bunch. And he took a fusee, and he melted off a piece of that lawn chair so that he could put it around that rod that goes on to that goes in front of the propeller. And then he used a fishing line, and not a fishing line, but what is it? The line that you keep the fish on.
Leader?
A what?
Is it the leader, or is it the gaff? Or
leader might be a name for it. I don't know. It's not the name we call it.
Is it a steel string like that goes at the end?
Well, it was a nylon string, but it had a metal end to it.
Okay.
And what it would do is when you would catch a fish, you would string that through his mouth and gills.
Got it.
And then you'd be able to put that metal thing in the ground on the bank so that they could still be in the water while you continue to fish.
Oh,
He took one of those, and he used that metal thing as the key, and he wrapped that nylon string around there to keep it from falling off. And I mean, it was just an ordeal. This took us like 3 hours to do this.
A leader line.
Is that what it's called? A leader
line?
Heather said a leader
stringer.
line.
That's what we used to call it. That's
Yeah.
what we call it in the South. We call it a stringer, but I guess a leader line is the technical name for it. But he did it. He secured that prop on that boat, and we were able to ride the boat back into the marina where we could get back to our car and everything. But yeah, it was like a MacGyver type thing. It was
serious MacGyver. That's amazing.
That is wild. I tell you,
man.
my dad didn't have he did a lot of things similar to that. I don't remember any of them that stand out. But I do remember that he taught me, I think even when I went to college, he gave me all that I needed for life. And it was a roll of duct tape and a can of WD-40.
There you go.
And he said, if it moves and it's not supposed to, use the duct tape. If it's stuck and it's supposed to be moving, use the WD-40. That's it. That's all the answers to all the problems.
There's a lot of truth to that. All right, looks like we got Marianne and Vinny on here. We've got Catherine Ann on here, and we've got Karen and Francesca on here.
Yep.
Glad to have all you guys on here. Looks like we've got 10 total, but not everybody's.
Andreas was on here.
Is Andreas on here?
Yeah.
Awesome. Glad to have Andreas on here.
There's Catherine. Catherine, we need to go walking out by the beach again. I thought about you the other day. We went walking not long after I moved here. It was during the COVID.
Oh,
And
really?
we went out by Prible and just kind of walked around the parking lot a few times. I just needed to get out and get some salt water in my lungs. It's a lot better than swallowing leaves, which is what I did today.
Yeah, she got a big swallow of leaves earlier today. They were blowing leaves, and Tammy walked from the house over to the church building, and she breathed in a big thing of leaves.
Yo, I thought I was gonna die. Like I couldn't breathe. A little leaf piece is no bigger than the end of an eraser. Almost killed me. Almost wiped me out right there. Life is fragile.
Life is fragile. All right, are we ready for our trivia?
No, but I'll get there. Do you have a trivia today? Is this our trivia?
We have a trivia every week.
Woo! All right, smart Alex.
What week have we not had a trivia?
It's only
Maybe in the early days before we started doing a trivia, but ever since we started it, we've had it every week.
Okay, I'm ready. Have we got a
ready?
score? We got to give a score?
Yeah, give us some scores.
I got to find the scorebook. I brought it with me. All right, so, this is hard to see in the dark. All right. We got Joan with 3, Christine with 4, Mark with 4, William with 6, and Karen with 6. There you go.
All right.
There you go. That's what we got. I didn't name off. We got a whole bunch of people with 1 and 2, so I didn't name them all.
All right. Here is the question, and a little build up to this. With our youth group on this past Monday night, there were 7 of us total, counting the leaders. And we were seeing if we could come up with all 10 of the 10 commandments without looking them up. And we did. We did come up with all of them. And so that was pretty cool. So here's the question. Can you name at least 5 of the 10 commandments? Can you name at least 5 of the 10 commandments?
We want to say hi to Amy, Oliver's mama.
Hi, Amy. Glad to have you on here with
Good to
us.
see ya. Hey, we want to say, while we're waiting on the answer, TJ, we want to give a shout out to TJ. TJ won 2 tickets to Maverick City worship concert tonight in Brooklyn, and he couldn't use them. He couldn't go, and so he asked me if we could get. So I kind of checked around with a few people. He ended up gifting them to Doug, our worship leader.
Oh, really?
How much is that? Just perfect. And so he was going over to Brooklyn tonight for an awesome time of worship.
Awesome.
So that's pretty awesome.
Very cool.
I didn't put it up on the screen. My bad. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I know. I typed it in quick. I had it in there. We want to say hello to Glen Cove. Is the neighbors in? Hold on. Brookville, Locust Valley, Glen Cove, Seacliff, Glen Head, Glenwood Landing, and surrounding areas. And we want to say hello to Glen Cove residents.
Hello, all of our community groups. We are glad that you are on here with us.
I believe Maxine McGee has joined us as well. Hi,
Maxine, glad to have you on here also.
She came a long way.
Anybody got an answer? Name at least 5 of the 10 commandments.
It was kind of funny because I made sure that my son is in the youth group, and so there was one in there that.
Ooh, my son is too.
Is he? I made sure that there was one in there that I wanted to make sure he paid attention to.
I know which one you're talking about.
I mean, all of them, obviously, but there's one that I just want, as a mama to a son, wanted to make sure. Anybody
Absolutely.
got any idea what that one is? Oh, here comes Karen. It takes a while to type all these out, y'all. I get it. There's Karen.
No other gods before me. That is correct. Do not bear false witness. That is correct, which means do not lie. Do not covet. That is correct. Do not dishonor God's name. That is correct. And no idols. That is correct. Karen has gotten all 5 of them. So let's see what 5 we've got here.
And just for
And then
the record,
we'll discuss the others.
just for the record, Karen, that's 7. That makes 3 times she's won.
Karen has reached the number 7 3 times this year. She is our leader.
She is awesome. That may be a new record. I don't think we've had them reach 3 wins anymore.
Well, it was just this year we started keeping that.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
There's Mark Hendricks. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark, glad to have you on here, my friend.
Oh, it's been a while. I missed you.
So, no other gods before me. That was number 1.
Yep.
Do not bear false witness. That one's number 9. Do not covet. That one is number 10. Do not dishonor God's name. That is number 3. And no idols. That was number 2. All right. Just for fun, let's see who can guess the others. And this is not for points or anything, so you can just throw out 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 if you know all 5 of them. But there's 5 that we have not mentioned. It's interesting. She got the first 3 and the last 2, but the ones in the middle are still open.
I got one.
What's that?
Honor thy mother and father.
Yes!
Honor thy mother, thy father, and thy mother. Yes, and that's the one that Tammy said she wanted to make sure that Dylan remembered.
There you go. I was thinking of you, Tammy.
You got
It's important to me too.
So that one is number 5.
Isn't that the only one that comes with a promise?
The only one that comes with a promise,
That's right.
so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you.
There you go.
So that's why I always honored my parents, because I wanted to live to be 100.
You wanted to, what is this? The live long and prosper?
Live long and prosper.
Yeah, there you go.
Mark said, I was just scrolling through and saw you guys were on, so I thought I would join you guys. Mark, we love it when you're on here, man. We've missed you. We haven't seen you much here recently.
Marianne's got one there. That's right.
There you go. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. That one is the number 4 commandment. All right, so we got 3 more to go.
I have that's probably the hardest one I have. That's a hard one for me. Is taking,
remembering the Sabbath?
To take a separate day. Holy means set apart. And it's hard for me to take a whole day and set it apart because most people use that as Sunday. Growing up, I used that as Sunday. Sunday is the absolute hardest day of my life every week. So it's really, really hard to keep that one. That I struggle with that. Mary, you got to remember the Sabbath. I think I got all the rest of them.
What was the name of
a few. I don't know if I want to. I'll let other people answer them, but Karen and they have one that says do not covet, but I think there were 2 about coveting. I think it was do not covet the neighbor's goods, and then do not covet the neighbor's, was it wife or spouse?
Adultery.
It's all into one. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's all part of one.
And was another one, thou shalt not steal?
That is another one. Yes, that is number 8. So there's 2 more.
Oh, we got one.
Do not kill. Do not murder. That one. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That one's number 6.
That's an important one too.
That is an important one. Yes.
They're all important.
Yes. So we've got 9 out of 10. We are missing 1. Does anybody know what one we are missing?
False standards for measuring?
That I think that is a commandment, but it wasn't one of the 10 commandments.
Okay. God's name in vain?
Karen named that one. That is a 10 commandment, but it's already been named.
No idols before me. No other gods before me.
Was it having to do with using the Lord's name in vain? Was that?
No, that is one of the commandments, but Karen listed that one
okay.
earlier.
Envy?
Not envy.
Oh, that's right. No other gods. I didn't see that. Okay.
Envy is one of the 7 deadly sins.
Oh, gluttony? No. I'm on the wrong thing. Oh my gosh! Why is this so hard?
It's just funny that this is the last one.
You shall not forget God. You shall not forget the commandments.
What does Marianne say? I can't see it because the hand's over it.
You shall not steal.
Shall not steal. That is one of the 10 commandments, but it was already mentioned earlier.
Oh my gosh! I feel like a really bad Christian. We should know this, right? What? Let me see your paper.
No. We're leaving one out. We've gotten 9 of them.
What are we leaving out? Joe, you're a preacher. You should know this.
I'm a Catholic. I should know it.
Still killed. Good adultery. Honor their mother and father. Read off the ones that we've already read.
All right, here's the ones we've already gotten. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything, which is an idol. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder.
I found it.
You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet. We're missing one. Joe said he found it. Oh, Marianne got it.
It's adultery. Yep.
You shall not commit adultery.
Okay. All
So,
right.
Joe, we know what we need to preach on Sunday.
Woo!
Oh, man.
It could be a series. 10 weeks.
A 10-week series. There you go.
You know, when I was at Crossroads Christian Church in Lexington, when we first went to Lexington, the first series that we were there for was called 10 Values to Base Your Life On. And it was a series through the 10 Commandments.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Was each week one of the commandments? Or?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
What was the name of it?
10 Values to Base Your Life On.
That's pretty
Is
interesting.
that Trevor?
No, it was Schneider's. What was his?
Glenn Schneider.
Glenn Schneider's.
Okay. That's cool.
That may be an idea in the future.
Aren't y'all meeting to come up with your next
Yeah,
series?
we need to meet sometime soon to come up with our next series. We'll have to
And we will.
at least include that one in the discussion. So good job, guys. All right. Hey, something we want to discuss, and then we're going to go into last week we were talking about something and everything just stopped all of a sudden. So we didn't get to complete that. But we do want to talk about something else before we get there. Joe and me and Tammy talked last week about the possibility of changing the format a little bit with ToJo. The reason being, we've lost a little bit of steam. Okay. We used to run between 15 and 20, and sometimes we'd get up around 25 with our viewership. Now we typically run between 5 and 10 with our viewership, and sometimes dips below 5. And so we're just looking at maybe some adjustments we can make. And as we were discussing them, somebody said, I think it was Joe, but I can't remember exactly, said, well, why don't we let our viewers decide? And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to throw out some options, and maybe you guys have some options that we haven't even thought of. But these are some of the things that we talked about last week. The possibility of cutting it down to a 30-minute show instead of an hour-long show. That's a possibility. And just because sometimes an hour could be a long time. And we do have people that come on for a while and then go off, and maybe it's just too long. I don't know. Another option is to do ToJo twice a month instead of doing it every week. We also mentioned doing it once a month instead of every week.
Like Jam Night.
Yeah, like jam nights. And even within that, we could do twice a month, hour long, or twice a month, 30 minutes long, or we could do once a month, an hour long, or once a month, 30 minutes long. Another option, and this isn't necessarily our favorite option, but listen, everything has a cycle, and maybe this has run its cycle and it's time to bring it to an end. I don't know. I don't want that to be the case, but I don't want to continue to do it just because we're trying to resuscitate a dead horse either. And so we're throwing those options out because we want to hear from you. What do you guys say? Do you want to keep it exactly how it is? Do you want to cut it down to 30 minutes? Do you want to do it twice a month or once a month? Or is it ready to phase this out and move on to something else that's going to be more effective? What do you guys think? We want to get your input.
Yeah. Tommy, one point too, I think, and you've mentioned it before, but I think it's important for those who haven't been with us since the beginning. You know, the genesis of ToJo began during COVID.
Yeah.
And it was a way for us to connect with the congregation. And primarily it was for praying, for prayer requests.
Yeah.
And then it kind of morphed into, I was going to say comedy hour, but but it turned into what we have today. And obviously we love doing this, but we've recognized, as Tommy said, that maybe some adjustments could be made.
Right. So, any input on your all's part?
Raise your hand if you think we should do it. No.
And we really do want to get your input because this is for you guys. It's not for Joe and I. We enjoy it. We look forward to this. But the value of this is that we get to spend this time with you. We get to share these things. We get to pray with you and for you. We get to discuss the things that are on your mind. And we that's the value of this.
Right.
And so we want to get your input from it.
And to that point, there is absolutely no offense. So don't be afraid to say, hey, it's run its course, or we think it should be twice a month or once a month. What's easier for you guys? I mean, I don't want anyone feeling obliged to come on this every week and say, oh, I got to go to ToJo now.
Right.
I want to say hi to Aura. She just jumped on.
Hey, Aura.
Aura, glad to have you on here.
There you go. I put the options up there, but there's obviously other options. I just put up the ones you mentioned.
Yeah, Tammy put up the ones that we mentioned, and as she said, there may be other options that we could come up with. So,
I like the idea of a in-house ToJo show and have a live broadcast and do it where people could come into the church and watch or be a part of a live audience if you wanted to.
We could do a live audience.
It would take a little setup, but if we only did it once a month,
or once a quarter.
Once
a quarter.
I think that a lot
and that's
of
possible
things,
too.
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to say hi to Lois Tubby. Hi, Lois.
Hey, Lois, glad to have you on here.
See, some of these times, like Aura and Lois, really, this is the only time we get to talk to them and we get to connect.
That's
with them.
true.
So that's one of the.
For those of you that just came on, we are talking about changing the format for ToJo, and the possibilities that we've thrown out there is doing a 30-minute show instead of an hour-long show, or doing once or twice a month instead of every week. It could be doing a live show either once a month or once a quarter even, or even once a year. Listen, we could do a live ToJo show once a year where people just bring questions, and once a year we go through this. Or it could be the possibility of, hey, it's time to phase this out. It's run its course. It's been a good thing, and it's time to move on to something else. So Marianne says maybe try twice a month and see how the participation is.
Or is asking why she didn't hear y'all.
The reason why is because it's lost a little bit of steam. There for a while, for a few years actually, we would have between 15 and 20 live viewers, and sometimes up around 25 or more.
Mm-hmm.
Over the past several months, it's been more like between 5 and 10 viewers, and sometimes even below 5. And so it's lost some steam, and we don't want to just continue to do it just because we've always done it, kind of thing. We only want to continue to do something that's continuing to bring the value. And if it's not as valuable as it once was, maybe we could put time and energy into pouring value into something else.
So Lois said, since I was an original viewer during
Yes.
COVID, and she came up with the name ToJo.
Yes, she did.
She said, I feel it should be 2 times a month for an hour.
2 times a month for an hour. All right. What somebody else said twice a month, didn't they, Mary Ann?
Yeah. Mary Ann and Lois both have said that.
So we've got 2 votes for twice a month.
We'll keep it open for the week, and because a lot of people will watch this on replay. So,
and this isn't going to happen immediately anyway. It's not like we're going to do it November. We'll do our regular weekly shows for a while anyways, and then we'll let you guys know when we make an adjustment, if we make an adjustment.
And one note too, if you don't feel comfortable posting this, on the chat over here, you could text Tommy or Tammy or myself.
Yeah, absolutely. You could text us.
Karen says maybe have a question or topic for each week, announce the week before, so there's time to consider it and think of questions that anyone might have about it.
That is a possibility too. Announcing ahead of time what our question or topic is going to be.
Catherine Ann said she votes for twice a month.
So we've got 3 votes for twice a month.
Now,
and listen, we could implement what Karen's talking about, even if we do switch to twice a month. We can still implement that.
Are you? Here's what I'm wondering. Are y'all gonna remember? Not you, but the listeners. Are y'all gonna remember to tune in? Like which weeks we have it and which weeks we don't.
Well, sure people know that.
Yeah.
And we could send out some kind of reminder.
And are we going to do like 1st and 3rd or 2nd and 4th? Or
probably something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. That because I do feel like that would help. That would help.
That would be easier than doing every other week. Yes. Every other week gets confusing.
Yes, it does.
So, like I said, you could continue to let us know. You could continue to put it in the chat box.
Yep, Catherine Ann said yes, a schedule.
Yeah. But it looks like people are leaning toward twice a month on that. All right, continue to give us input on that. We're going to move on to another thing. But again, if you want to put that in the chat box or text us and let us know, we are definitely open to that as well. Hey, last week, for some reason, we were in the middle of a discussion. What is this? Exactly what I was thinking. A reminder might be needed. Yeah. In the middle of our discussion, the computer or something shut down. I don't know exactly what happened. We still don't know exactly what happened, but it just came to an end all of a sudden.
Yeah, that was really weird.
And we were talking about this graphic, and Tammy's actually going to bring this up on the screen. Put it in between us again if you can, because I think it looks better that way.
I'll have to take Joe out for just a second to bring it up. So
all right.
There we go.
All right. This is a graphic that we looked at last week, and it was just interesting because our question, yeah.
You're letting things come between you guys.
Our trivia question last week was who wrote more of the Old Testament than any other author? And of course, the answer is Moses. He wrote at least 5 books and 1 psalm. It's possible he also wrote an additional psalm, and it's also possible that he also wrote Job. And so he wrote more of the Old Testament than any other author. And probably when people hear that, they go, yeah, that makes sense. What may be surprising, and to be honest with you, was surprising to me, according to this graph, Moses wrote more of the whole Bible than any other author. Now, you may say, well, what about Paul? Paul wrote like 13 books. Moses only wrote, 6 or 7 at the most, or maybe 8. What, 5, 6? Yeah, 8. 8 at the most. How does that point out that Moses wrote more than Paul did? Well, Paul's books were actually letters, and they're much shorter. And if you see there in that graph, one of the things, the guy that did this, Jeffrey Kranz, and he is counting the words in the original Hebrew and the original Greek. He's not counting them in English. But if you see there, Moses wrote 125,139 words in the Bible. Paul wrote 32,408 words. So it's not even close that Moses wrote more than Paul. Matter of fact, Ezra wrote more than Paul. Ezra wrote at least 3 books. Ezra and Nehemiah and my mind went blank. What was the other one? I'll think of it in a minute. But he wrote this. As far as we know, we're pretty confident he wrote at least 3 books, possibly more. But he wrote 43,618 words. Luke, even though Luke did not write as many books as Paul, he actually wrote more words than Paul in the New Testament. Luke wrote 2 books, the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts. Both of them not as long as Moses's books, but longer than Paul's books. And he wrote 37,932 words. So he is in 3rd place for the most words from a biblical author. Jeremiah is 4th in that. He wrote the book Jeremiah, and he also wrote Lamentations. He wrote 2 books, and there are 35,306 words in those 2 books. And then, of course, Paul wrote 12 to 13 books, depending on how you look at it, 32,408 words. And then
what's real interesting about that, the average page has 2,000 words on it. So if you look at Moses writing 101, that's 500 pages.
Wow. I hadn't thought about it that way, but
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's a lot of pages.
Yeah. And notice what this guy put down there in the corner. Only 5 authors wrote almost 45% of the whole Bible. Almost 45%, which is real amazing when you stop and think about the fact that the Bible has over 40 different authors. And so you've got a lot of smaller writings by a lot of different authors, by at least 35 different authors in there. I just thought that was interesting as I was looking up some Bible trivia, and I put in the question, I Googled it, who wrote the most, and I was pretty confident Moses was going to be the answer, but I just like to check myself to make sure. I don't want to get on here and have the wrong answer for you guys. So I Googled that question, who wrote most of the Old Testament, and I found the article from this guy with this graphic in it, and I just thought that was interesting, and I wanted to share it with you guys.
And that is really interesting, because if you would have asked me before seeing this graph, who wrote more of the New Testament, Luke or Paul, as far as words, I would have said Paul. And I know most people would have.
Yeah, I agree. No.
That's interesting.
Very interesting.
Okay, done with it. You want me to take it down?
Yeah, you can take it down now.
There you go.
All right.
Bring you and Joe back together.
Together again.
Lay your head over on the line. No, there you go. Oh.
You guys are crazy.
Y'all are nuts.
All right, guys. Any more input on the change of our format here and the way that we do things? We continue to take that. I came across a question the other day, and it was this: why do some churches thrive while others die? That is an excellent question. All right, Aura's got a suggestion. Just a suggestion, since we live in controversial times, maybe talk about controversial issues that relate to today: the good, the bad, and the ugly.
We have a lot of that.
Listen, we have had some, and when we are specifically asked the question, we have addressed controversial issues. I am open to discussing anything that you guys give us. I'm not going to come up with those on my own. I'm not going to say, hey, here's a controversial issue, let's talk about this. If you guys bring those to us, if you have a question about something, if you say, talk about this topic or something like that, we are completely open to doing that. Now, like I said, we don't always have the answers, and we're not always going to say, this is what you got to do in this. Usually what we do is we present a discussion about that particular topic. Controversial that relates to the Bible. Yeah, we've done that. We've done some of those. Now, it's not something we do consistently. It's not like every week we have a controversial issue. But we have had some over the years on here. Again, if you give us something specific, we will definitely talk about it. Even if we've already talked about it. Because some of those things are a couple years down the road. Especially, we talked about, remember we had a lady as a guest on here that was talking about, it was something to do with racial tension that was taking place. This would have been either late 2020 or early 2021 when racial tensions in our country were
at a peak.
Yeah. Probably the highest they had been since the 60s, to be honest with you. And so, and we talked about it, and we had her on here, and she didn't necessarily agree with us. She was not argumentative or anything like that. We had a very peaceful conversation, but we had that discussion. We talked about a controversial issue, especially at that time. It was especially controversial. So yeah, anything that you guys have for us, listen, we are open to any question you bring our way. We will discuss it. All right, back to this question. Why do some churches thrive while others die? And that is a very good question. And I have a lot of answers for this question. Listen, sometimes smaller churches, and especially dying churches, are very negative toward larger and growing churches. And their argument is, oh, they're just catering to the culture, or they're watering down God's word, or they're just in it for the money, and all of this stuff. And listen, I have been a part of 3 larger churches. One of them, two of them were right around 1,000. And one of them was up around 8,000 that I've been a part of. I have studied probably 50 of them, 50 larger churches like that. And when I say larger, I mean 2,000 or more. And because they inspire me, not because they're large, but because they are effectively doing exactly what Jesus told us to do. They are reaching people with the gospel. Please, 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 please do not slip into Satan's trap of condemning churches just because they're large or growing. Because to do that, you've got to put down the church in the New Testament. Now, Here's an odd trend that took place in the New Testament. In the Gospels, the followers of Jesus started as just a small group of people. You had the apostles and you had some others, but it was a small group of people. But as his popularity grew, so did his followers, obviously. And there were times you had thousands of people. When Jesus fed the 5,000, that was not counting the women or children. There was possibly as many as 15,000 there. Okay? And so you see these multitudes coming to Jesus. That, by definition, a mega church is considered 2,000 or more. So by definition, that would have been a mega church at that point. Now, when Jesus was led to be crucified, a lot of those fell away. And by the end of all of that, after Jesus had been crucified and he was dead and he was buried, there were 120. Okay, so it dwindled. Now, maybe that was the true followers and the others were not true followers. That happens. Okay, maybe that's the case. I don't know. And so you had that cycle of when it was huge, but then it came down to where it was smaller. It was 120 people. So going into the beginning of the book of Acts, we have a group of 120 people. On the day of Pentecost, which was 50 days after the Passover, which was around the time that Jesus was crucified. So we're looking at less than a 2-month period here. Peter preaches the gospel on the day of Pentecost. 3,000 people decide to follow Jesus. So in one day, they grow from 120 to 3,000. So they grow from a small to moderate sized church to, again, they're a mega church. And then throughout the book of Acts, they just continue to grow and expand. Now, does that mean that each individual church was running in the thousands? No, it doesn't mean that at all. And, they don't really give us a number of those individual churches. They were probably not in the thousands, at least in the beginning. But were gatherings of thousands, especially there in Jerusalem with the early church, of thousands of people. And so for us to put down large churches, we would have to include, if we're just putting them down because they're large, we would have to include the church there in the early part of the book of Acts in that. And I'm not willing to do that because I think that their church was large because they took serious the call of Jesus. And what I have discovered in the 3 large churches I've been a part of, in the 50 plus large churches that I have studied in depth, that they are large for the same reason, is because they decided to take serious the call of Jesus to reach people with the gospel. So please do not fall in the trap of putting down a church just because it is large. There is nothing holy about being small. Now, being small doesn't mean that we're being bad. Okay? There are very holy churches. There are churches that are small. And listen, sometimes they're small because of their geographical location. I mean, if you're in a town of 200 people, you're not going to have a church of 2,000. Okay? So I'm not saying that churches have to be large to take serious the call of Jesus. But I am saying this, that we should never be satisfied, whether we're running 20, 200, 2,000, or 200,000. We should never be satisfied with the number of people we're reaching as long as there are people that do not know Jesus within a 5-mile radius of our church building.
Brother, just one point on that. I think it's real important, to emphasize that, a church doesn't start off at 2,000 members. You look at Saddleback Church and you know it well. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Rick Warren and his wife Kay started that in their home.
They did. Yep.
And now they've got campuses or churches all over, I don't know, all over the world, but certainly all over the States, and tens of thousands. Yep. And I think the reason they grow is because they're doing the right thing. They're feeding their congregation. They're doing great missions work. They're doing a lot of things, and God enables them to grow. And I think on the flip side of that, if a church is not preaching the word and not doing the right thing, I think God shuts that church down.
Yeah.
I really do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you 100%, Joe. There's an excellent book. I would encourage anyone to read it. It's called The Autopsy of a Deceased Church by Tom Rainer. Tom Rainer is awesome, by the way. Anything by Tom Rainer is worth reading. But this is it's a very short book. You could see it. You could read it in a day. If you're a slow reader, you could read it in a day. If you're a fast reader, you could probably read it in a couple hours. And what they did is they studied churches that are dying or have died, and what was it within those churches that caused that death. And I'm looking down here at the time, and we're almost out of time. I tell you what, we will pick up with this next time because this is worth sharing, and it's some great information in there. So there you go. You know what we're going to be talking about next week: the autopsy of a deceased church. That is a loaded question, but I would have to say the leadership.
When you asked why do some churches?
And Aura, I agree with you 100%. 100%. Everything rises and falls on leadership. If a church remains small, they're in a community where there's lots of people to reach with the gospel, and they remain small, it's because the leadership has refused to take serious the call of Jesus.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen.
Now, does that mean that every large church is taking serious the call of Jesus? No. I know that there's large churches out there that are just large because of gimmicks and stuff like that. But in my studies
and stuff like that.
Yeah, I got to stop staying and stuff like that.
It's
filler junk in that bad habit I've developed. But in the ones that I have studied, the majority of them, and when I say majority, I mean a large majority, that is not the case. That is the exception. That is not the rule of larger churches. Most churches are larger because they have decided to take serious the call of Jesus to reach lost people with the Gospels. Karen says, I think churches thrive when people live out biblical principles. Oh, that is very well put, Karen. Churches thrive when people within that congregation live out biblical principles. One of those biblical principles, and we'll talk about more of them next week, but one of those is reaching people with the gospel. All right, Joe, we've got like a minute left.
I know. Hey, brother, it's great to be here. It's great to be here with thanks everyone for joining us. Remember, if there's a prayer request you have that you haven't had a chance to, put it in the chat or email Tammy, or myself. We'd love to pray for you guys. And
absolutely.
By the way, it was 78 degrees on Long Island this morning, and I should say today, which was unbelievable for November. I
have the air conditioner still in the windows.
There you go. Don't shut it down yet.
All right, guys. Thank you for being on here with us. Thank you for your feedback on how to change the format, and we will definitely look at that. It seems like going to 2 a month, or Aura says 91 in Tampa. So guys, thank you for being on here. We're going to wrap up our series on standing firm this week as we look at the last 2 pieces of God's armor that we use to fight our spiritual battles. Hope we are able to see you there, either online or in the building. We love you guys. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you for joining us.